Hi, I'm FMarch, and today I'm going to be talking about the life of Maria de Jesus Paez de Ruiz. Maria changed my perspective on what it means to be faithful to God, family, and community. Maria is a beautiful 87-year-old widow, devout Catholic, mother, grandmother, professor emeritus, and Cuban. Maria can be described as wise. Santrock 2015 defines wisdom in senior adults as, quote, expert knowledge about the practical aspects of life that permits excellent judgment about important matters, unquote. Santrock further discusses practical knowledge as having good judgment and an understanding of how to cope with issues that occur in one's life. Today I hope to share with you a little bit about Maria's life. During this presentation, I will be talking about themes in her life, milestones, and significant developmental topics. I also hope to show you a little bit about her life through the photos that I have included in this presentation. These photos were provided to me by Maria and her son Ignacio. Maria was born in Pinar del Rio, Cuba on February 26, 1931. Maria had an affection for Cuba. She thought it was the most beautiful place with pine trees and beaches. Prior to Castro forcing Baptista out, Cuba was a wonderful place to live. Everyone was happy and everyone flourished. The dominant themes apparent during my interview with Maria included the foundational significance of faith, family, and community. Although Maria's professional accomplishments are significant, her main focus is on others. Throughout the interview, Maria spoke of her faith as the crucial factor that helped shape her whole being. The center of Maria's life was her faith. She grew up Catholic with a special affection for God and the Church. She went to private Catholic schools and had a very close relationship with the sisters that nurtured and taught her. At 15, Maria became involved in Catholic Action for Youth. Her mentor was Hermano Victorino de la Salle, who was beatified in 2016. Victorino lived in Havana and traveled to Pinar del Rio to meet with Maria to ask for her help in expanding the Catholic Action for Youth effort. She said having Victorino as a mentor was, quote, a privilege from the Lord. It was through Maria's involvement with Catholic Action for Youth that she met her husband, during which time they established a deep relationship. Maria's family is integrated into every aspect of her life. Her parents were influential in her life and were foundational in the development of her faith. Maria viewed her mother as a saint who was spiritually disciplined and always had a rosary. Her father pushed Maria to be the best she could be. After Maria left Cuba, she stayed cognitively aware of her father's support and wisdom. She had a happy childhood. One of her favorite activities was roller skating and playing with her brothers. I asked Maria what kind of roller skates she had, and she said, of course, the kind with a key. Maria has stayed active in the church community all of her life. When Maria moved to Oklahoma, she and her husband, Ignacio, were instrumental in building the Father Stanley Rother Hispanic Cultural Institute in Norman, Oklahoma. This is a great program, and my husband and I had the opportunity to participate in a couple of semesters. And this is really when I developed an affection for Maria. Over her life, Maria has responded to goodness and truth and given herself fully to God, the Church, her family, and her community. Maria's ability to maintain a healthy balance between her faith, family, and service to community has contributed to her current psychological capacity. Maria has had many milestones in her life, and I only have time to share a few. I've already talked about her involvement with Catholic Action for Youth, and I've already mentioned that this is where she met her husband, Ignacio. Leaving Cuba and her relationship with her husband are very significant milestones. Some other milestones include becoming a professor and receiving the Pro Ecclesia et Pontifex Cross. I will be focusing primarily on Maria's exile out of Cuba and her relationship with her husband, which encompasses some of these other milestones. Maria's exile out of Cuba in 1962 was a milestone in her life that led to opportunity and positive change. Many of the priests and sisters in Cuba were relocated to Jamaica, Puerto Rico, and America. Maria believes that she and her husband's involvement with the Catholic Church led to her husband's temporary imprisonment and ultimately their exile out of Cuba. It was the church, Oliva Tobacco Company, and her faith that protected and helped Maria and her family get out of Cuba. The only severance for a person fleeing Cuba was the clothes on their back and 60 pounds of material items. On their way to Jamaica, Maria asked her husband, "What are we going to do now?" Her young son, Ignacio, reached into his pocket and offered his coins to his parents, saying, "Papi, I have money." It was through Maria's involvement with Catholic Action for Youth that she met her husband, during which time they established a deep relationship. They have 2 children, several grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. They were married for almost 58 years. They have always served God, the church, each other, and the community. During the interview, Maria told me that, quote, "serving the Lord is a privilege," unquote. Together, Maria Ignacio accomplished a great deal. He was always supportive of Maria through many trials, good times, and awards. On August 14, 2005, Ignacio and Maria received the Pro Ecclesia et Pontifex Cross as a sign of the Holy Father's recognition of distinguished service to the community. The award was granted by Pope John Paul II on February 16, 2005, near the end of his reign as spiritual leader. This recognition was a culmination of Maria's and her husband's service to others. Developmental topics identified during the interview include Maria's devotion to God and the church and the death of her husband. One's religious inclination is important to many people in society, and more so in older adults. From a religious point of view, a long life is often seen as a reward and something to face with dignity and anticipation. Maria was emotional about the death of her husband and struggles with his absence. His death is a relatively new wound and occurred in 2013. Psalm 23 was his favorite scripture. Quote, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me," unquote. These are the words he kept close to his heart even in death. She provided the details of his death with tears in her eyes. Maria described her husband's death from her perspective as horrible. But for him, it was peaceful. Santrock defines grief as, quote, "the emotional numbness, disbelief, separation anxiety, despair, sadness, and loneliness that accompany the loss of something we love," unquote. Grief is a complex emotion and can be devastating for those who do not emerge from its grasp. Maria, while devastated by her husband's death, does not allow her loss to consume her. Maria has always been surrounded by saints in the church. Maria's mother, Hermano Victorino de la Salle, and Father Stanley Rother surround Maria. On Saturday this year, September 23rd, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City will be hosting a ceremony for the rite of beatification for Father Stanley Rother. Maria just seems to be connected to the faithful. Today, Maria is a matriarchal figure in the Catholic Church. I was completely humbled by the interview. I learned from Maria that faith, family, profession, and service to community is what makes life worth living. Maria's secret that I do not think she would mind me sharing with you is is that wherever they were planted, Maria and her family looked for ways to serve the church. According to Maria, and I already said this before, but I just want to repeat it because it's beautiful. Quote, serving the Lord is a privilege, unquote. Maria has successfully passed this legacy on to her children and grandchildren. These are some of my references. And I would like to conclude with a quote from Maria. I would like to share this in Maria's own voice. This is Maria's advice for those of us who still have work to do.
I only want you to see how the Lord works. If you do something for the Lord, I mean, only in that, you are not looking for yourself. Serving the Lord, He's going to tell you He's happy with what you have been doing.